It'll show up on Oregon City
Silence
Chit
your
Chat, and then I'll really be in trouble.
So did I.
All right, let's get her going here. We're convening the work session for the Oregon City Commission. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rachel Lau Smith is absent this evening, and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So first up is 1989 interviews for Urban Renewal Commission positions. Do we have a listed question? Oh, here it is.
Yeah, it's right here.
All right. So,
I saw
Mr.
it.
Schlagenhofer, will you come please, sir?
Oh, the questions are right there.
Denise, you want to start us off?
What's question number one?
Yes.
Hi, Dirk.
Hello. Mic on? Okay.
The first question is as follows. Please provide us with a brief introduction of yourself, your background and experience, and why you would like to serve on the city's Urban Renewal Commission.
I wrote some notes. Can I use those?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I forget things when I'm trying to think. Appreciate that. My name is Dirk Schlagenhofer. I was born in Germany in 1971, immigrated to the U.S. in 1977. I've lived here in the last 42 years. Lived in the Northwest the entire time and in Oregon City the last 20.
To be clear.
Yes.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
I am a permanent alien.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Resident.
I have 30 years of experience manufacturing plastic products. This includes working with mechanical engineers, material suppliers. Being a family business, I've been involved in every aspect of business management, business growth. This includes building maintenance, plumbing, wiring, mechanical. When we needed to expand, I was involved in business, building design, structural engineering, planning, zoning, building codes, building construction, permitting, and inspections. Because of this background, I became extremely adept at problem solving, troubleshooting, and building construction. This experience set me up later for residential construction and restoration. As a hobby, I've built a couple of homes and restored some old homes in Oregon City. And then lately I've served 1 year on the Oregon City Planning Commission. As a hobby, as much as manufacturing has made for a successful life, it's not nearly as rewarding as fixing up old buildings and helping neighborhoods improve. The properties we've improved have improved neighborhoods and raised assessed values. I would love to apply the things I've learned to city-sized projects.
What is your level of understanding of how urban renewal works? Please explain. And what impacts on the community have you observed as a result of urban renewal?
All right, well, the technical part of that is it works with tax increment financing, which basically it pays for improvements or it helps to repay bonds that were used to make improvements. It gets very technical. I'm not going to go through all of that. It's all on the website. The dumbed-down version of that is certain areas of cities become blighted for various reasons. Because of the blight, some businesses can be scared away, lease rates drop, sometimes assessed values will go flat or it can go down. In urban renewal, we step in, we improve many things like utility infrastructure, roads, we can add bike lanes, improve transit lines. We can help building owners with repairs and facade upgrades. This in turn polishes the image of an area and attracts businesses. Urban renewal helps new businesses get up and running, which adds employment. Once an area thrives, property values go up. Taxes can then go up and the area becomes a contributing member of the city.
Frank?
So the question, what if he answered the second part, if he wants to have, so that's the understanding. What impacts have you observed as a result of urban renewal in Oregon City?
Well, like down on Main Street, I remember when I moved here, I think that was back when the county offices were starting to pull out. And it almost turned into a ghost town. Things were run down. It was looking pretty crummy. At the time, I didn't understand that urban renewal was getting involved. But was it the Caulfield House, the verdict? I think that was one of the first ones I saw get updated. And then it just started kind of snowballing. Everything came together. I think Nebbiolo went in, Winehards. It kind of went from old crummy bars to, places you're not embarrassed to go to. Definitely, I noticed that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Dirk. The third question is simply, do you think urban renewal is a beneficial economic development tool, and is to be responded to as why or why not?
Yeah, I think this goes back to my experience with home restoration. We've noticed that when you improve one property, it's contagious. It helps, the next door neighbor will either improve their property or possibly will try to figure out how you did yours, do the same thing. They might sell because now their value has gone up. Values go up as they sell and get resold, they get reassessed, which makes taxes go way up, which is, where am I going with this? We're on 3, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then some of these people, they couldn't do this without urban renewal, is the problem. So as an investor, we've bought some properties, and then when we resold them, the assessed values went up dramatically. Some people can't do that. Some of the people that own some of the older buildings, upgrades can be very expensive. So by helping them, you're helping the entire area.
That's true. One of the criteria is the but-for criteria, but for urban renewal. Would this happen? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
The current urban renewal work plan has a set of objectives and priorities. How would these objectives and priorities be aligned with your objectives and priorities as an urban renewal commissioner?
All right. Well, as far as I can see, there's 12 of them, unless they've been updated, but I couldn't see that they've been updated. So I'm just going through them, eliminating blighting conditions, make public improvements to encourage new private investment, increase taxable values. And it's, well, okay, and then it goes on to certain areas. Number 7 was Clackamas Cove, which I'm not quite sure where that was going right now. Building rehabilitation assistance, traffic pedestrian, a lot of these things that I've just previously mentioned. I think if I get involved, I would really like to try to hit some of the bigger ones, the Rossman landfill, the Clackamas Cove. I think if the Clackamas Cove can still happen during this boom, which I'm not sure how much time is left, because I'm already starting to see some signs of it softening. If we can get a couple of the bigger ones done, I think that would be more important right now than some of the smaller ones. Because the big ones are only going to happen when things are going really well. And once we've missed that, then we've got some small ones, and they're not going to have anywhere near the impact on the city as the larger projects. So I think that's what I would focus on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McGriff?
Only a few more. What significant contribution do you think you could make to the Commission's efforts in accomplishing the goals and objectives of the urban renewal plan?
Well, I don't know if my skills would be useful, but I have a lot of skills in, I've worked with a lot of designers. I know commercial lenders. I know developers. I can assess the needs of an old building. I can picture improvements without having to draw them up. I can kind of have a good imagination for what a building needs and what it can look like.
So big picture.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Mr. Smith?
In your opinion, how informed are Oregon City citizens about the fundamentals of urban renewal? And if communication or informational improvements are needed, what ways would you improve community education on urban renewal?
Well, from all the people I've talked to, there's a small group of people that understand it pretty well because they follow it. But I think the general public has about no clue how it works. And I think that's part of the misconception of it, the fact that people don't understand it, and they just hear what, the people that kind of understand it say, and then nobody really studies the thing, and they just are taught to hate it. But as far as what can we do to make it, to make people understand it better, not that many people follow the city website. Putting stuff on there, the small group that does look at the city website, they're always there. They're here. They show up to the meetings. But the general public, I think we're just going to have to go talk to them. As far as public outreach, I think Mayor Holliday probably does more than anybody, being on Oregon City Chit Chat and at least discussing things with people. Nobody else, I just see nobody else, on there. And I mean, that's how I found out about working for the government. Before that, I thought the whole thing was unapproachable.
Commissioner Smith?
I just did that one.
Oh, sorry. Commissioner O'Donnell.
So question number 7, Dirk, just simply says, if chosen, how would you interpret your role and what would be your expectations throughout your term of service as an Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission member?
I'm not exactly sure what
Neither am I.
you would be doing. I would hope that I'd be involved in maybe choosing properties, voting on properties, figuring out what they need, figuring out how we're going to finance it, things like that.
Okay. Do you have any additional comments or anything you'd like to ask the commission?
I have one. Any idea what's next with the Cove?
Yes, but I can't talk about it now.
Fair enough. All right. Leave this on here.
All right, thanks, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go in opposite order this time. So you're gonna start Frank.
Okay.
Please state your name for the...
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. My name's Sean Cross.
Well, hello, Mr. Cross. I'm Frank O'Donnell. I'm going to start off asking you the first question, which you have before you, I believe, and simply says, please provide us with a brief introduction of yourself, your background and experience, and why you want to serve on the city's Urban Renewal Commission.
Okay, my name's Sean Cross. I guess I've lived here in town for about 5 years. I'm the finance director for the city of Lake Oswego, who has 2 urban renewal districts. So
We won't hold that against you.
so I have a lot of experience with TIF and how it all works. My kids are older now and would like to just really volunteer my time to help the community, or if they choose me or not.
Commissioner Smith?
What is your level of understanding of how urban renewal works? Please explain. And then also, what impacts have you seen in the community as a result of urban renewal?
So, I'd say I'm probably an intermediate probably level, being the finance person for another city that has urban renewal. I've seen, right now we have a project, so here I don't really know too much about how it's really impacted because I haven't really looked at the tax rolls, but there I've seen, a project that went in about 4 years ago, had a $3 million AV, moved to an $80 million AV. So I've seen it have a lot of positive impacts with how it actually will impact a given area.
So I have a rule
Okay.
You were going to say, I was asking if you wanted to say AV.
that we don't use acronyms here. So AV means what for the general items?
Okay, sorry, that's assessed value.
Thanks.
So basically trying to get rid of blights, so getting rid of an old supermarket. Their assessed value used to be about $3 million. This year on the tax roll is around $80 million. So, in a 4-year period, about a $77 million increase in the AV for the city.
Commissioner McGriff?
I like to go shopping at Weezer's.
Yeah, that's the one.
It just was old school. It was just a fun place to go in. And of course, they had a fantastic selection of everything. But anyway, so just a little bias there. I didn't think it was so old and decrepit, but I understand what happened. Do you think, I think it's obvious, but do you think urban renewal is a beneficial economic development tool? Why or why not?
I think it's very beneficial. I don't think it's beneficial for the generation that starts it. So like, I know the one here started in 1990. That generation, it won't be as beneficial for, but the next generation or 2 generations down the road, it will have a huge impact on what, for that, I guess, for one, the tax base on what you can do with it, but the other thing is just bringing back development within an area. I mean, speaking of Weiser's, what was there before and what is there now is, within a 4-year period, is totally different.
They have the wine shop across the way now, though.
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay, so the current urban renewal work plan has a set of objectives and priorities. How would these objectives and priorities be aligned with your objectives and priorities as an urban renewal commissioner?
I guess really what is in the plan and what is of priority. There's not everything that's probably in the plan or was approved in the 07 update would probably be able to be done. So there has to be priorities within the projects that are available of which ones you do want to accomplish.
So the fifth question, which starts on the second page,
Okay.
simply says, what is a significant contribution that you could make to the Urban Renewal Commission's effort in accomplishing the goals and objectives of the Urban Renewal Plan?
Probably just my day-to-day working with urban renewal and just knowing how it really runs, I think would probably be my biggest or largest contribution.
You already bring an understanding to the table.
Yes.
In your opinion, how well informed are Oregon City citizens about the fundamentals of urban renewal? And if communication or informational improvements are needed, what ways would you involve community education on urban renewal?
Improve.
Improve? What did I say?
Involve.
Oh. Improve.
That might work.
Yeah, that I'm not really sure about. I mean, as a citizen, I wasn't really too informed on what was going on, but I really wasn't looking either. What really piqued my interest was the vote that we had a couple of years ago, and then seeing that the citizens actually voted to not have any more expenditures, I thought was interesting, and maybe they didn't understand how the tool worked and why the city had wanted to do it, almost 30 years ago. So I guess more outreach or something. I don't know. All I know is my neighbors don't talk about it with me, and I didn't really know too much about it.
I think what we do is we get signs in our yards that say, "Ask me about urban renewal."
Yes.
Commissioner McGriff?
So, Sean, if you were chosen, how would you interpret your role and what would be your expectation through your term of service as an urban renewal commissioner?
I guess it would really to do what the community wanted to be done. What did they find important, and how can I help contribute in making decisions on what the plan is to get it done? Not be a roadblock, not be, someone that doesn't want.
Sure.
I mean,
Okay. Do you have any additional comments, or is there anything you would like to ask the commission?
I guess I just had one, just because I was looking through the plans online and that kind of stuff. I was just trying to figure out, I saw that the maximum indebtedness limit had been changed in 2007 up to $130 million. What I couldn't find is a listing of what projects had already been done, a list of what projects still needed to be done, and how much those would be. I mean, I kind of assumed just by looking at what the assets were on the books, that about 40 million. They probably had some administration, so the expenditures were probably around 45 million, but nowhere did I find that information. So I just was curious, am I in the ballpark of how much is still left to be done on the plan, or what's available?
Mr. Conco?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Parno.
You are in the ballpark on the maximum indebtedness spent.
Thank you.
And there is a page that talks about some of the projects, but I know it would be nice to have a very specific listing that ties into that plan. So that's something the commission has been working toward along with the city manager. So, Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to ask, what neighborhood do you live in?
The Park Place neighborhood?
Oh, nice.
Just up on Fulcum.
It's what I thought, but I couldn't remember.
Thank you.
So to be clear, we have 2 spots, right?
Yes.
You should.
And
So
You should leave.
Mr. Van Haverbeek is asking to be reappointed.
Right.
Outraged.
That's my understanding.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Name and the city of residence for the record, please.
Steve Van Haverbeek, Oregon City.
Commissioner McGriff.
So Steve, why do you want to continue to serve on the city's Urban Renewal Commission? We obviously are familiar with you and know about your background and about you, but if you want to add anything that we don't know, in addition to that question, please feel free.
Well, I still believe in the goals of urban renewal. I think it has done a wonderful job when it's applied correctly. So, and I would like to continue to oversee that process with the rest of the commission.
Commissioner Smith.
What is your level of understanding of how urban renewal works? And what impacts on the community have you observed as a result of urban renewal?
So urban renewal is to use tax increment funding to make investments in an urban renewal district so that the overall standard of the area can be improved, to remove blight, make the city more livable, and allegedly not to cost the any of the taxpayers additional taxes.
So, and what impacts have you seen in the community from urban renewal?
Well, Main Street is prime example of the good that urban renewal can do. All of the work that's been done with restoring buildings, with doing storefronts. I've seen other cities where the urban renewal districts have really improved. So Wilsonville and Astoria, so lots of places where the whole environment has improved.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I actually think Mr. Van Haverbeek has already answered this in the first two questions, but I'll just ask you, if you want to elaborate, you've essentially answered this third question, which is before you, which states, do you think urban renewal is a beneficial economic development tool, and why or why not? And I believe you've essentially answered in the first. If you want to elaborate further, feel free.
So it's a tricky question, but it can be when applied correctly.
Good answer.
When projects that will actually increase the tax base are allowed to happen, then yes, it's a good tool.
Okay. Current urban renewal work plan has a set of objectives and priorities. How would these objectives and priorities be aligned with your objectives and priorities as an urban renewal commissioner?
Well, the two of the main ones that we've got the Cove, which is, again, having issues with, and the landfill, which are the two big project areas available in the urban renewal district. So I think those should be considered the priorities.
Okay. Commissioner McGriff?
Are we allowed to ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So just before I get to my question, you mentioned twice that you support urban renewal if it is applied correctly. Could you, I think I know what you mean by that, but could you explain what you mean by applied correctly? I think it's really relevant.
No, he tried to answer your question without saying anything.
So I didn't say anything, but this building, I think, is a prime example
of correctly or not correctly?
Not correctly.
That's a correct answer.
Okay.
Yes.
So this would not where do we get a tax increment from this building? So,
You won't get any argument up here.
Not from me.
And correctly?
correctly, anything that removes blight. So we've got a couple of houses down Main and what's it? 14th.
Yeah.
All of the stores along Main Street, even the up 7th, that have been improved with urban renewal funds and have the tax base has definitely improved for those. So
Okay, so we're on 6.
Now you're on 5.
5, okay. What significant contribution could you make to the Urban Renewal Commission's efforts in accomplishing the goals and objectives of our plan?
I think just to help keep it on track, make sure that the urban renewal process is allowed to continue to work, that the projects are chosen in such a way that they have a chance of improving our quality of life here. And try and keep urban renewal functioning under its current legal issues.
Commissioner Smith?
In your opinion, how well informed are Oregon City citizens about urban renewal, the fundamentals of urban renewal? And if communication or informational improvements are needed, what ways would you improve community education on urban renewal?
There does seem to be a lot of misconceptions on how urban renewal works, especially based on the ballot proposal on seeing that it's costing more taxes to the people in the city. And in order to address that, we need to it's tough to lead people through a teaching moment, but we've got to find a way to let people know that urban renewal is not a bad thing to have in our city.
Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'm going to read this as written. If chosen, how would you interpret your role and what would be your expectations throughout your term of service as an Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission member?
Well, the biggest issue would be to look at projects that are being proposed, to evaluate them on how well they meet the criteria of urban renewal, and to support or deny them based on that criteria. So it's something that I believe that I can make an analysis and help come to a consensus as to whether we're staying the course or not.
Thank you.
The last one, so you have any additional comments or is there anything you'd like to ask the commission?
No, I think you all know me.
All right,
Worked together for years.
all right. Thanks, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to presentation to inform City Commission about proposed redevelopment of the lower campus of the Forest Edge Apartment Complex. Mr. Lewis, I'd like to ask you to keep this fairly brief because I'm pretty sure I have a pretty good sense of where the commission is at on this particular item.
I'll do my best. The applicant is here and they brought several consultants so
All right.
for conversation.
And I would just like to point out, this is informational
Right.
for questions, potentially a land use action that could be appealed to the commission.
So they haven't been before the planning commission yet? So is this a good idea, doing this before they go to the planning commission?
So we recognize that this is a type 2 land use process.
Doesn't go to the planning commission.
So we're bringing it to you.
This is a type 2?
It's a type 2 application land use act. So it's at staff level and we are trying to share with you information.
Sorry, I find that extremely difficult to believe that this is a type 2 application, considering that in my first year in office, we had to evict 40 people at Christmas time because the entire land is sliding into the gully. How can this possibly be a type 2 application?
Well, maybe Laura can help me with this, but one thing, there's no land division there. Most of these issues are related to the geologic hazards and the natural resources and site plan. And of course, the buildings, but
Does the commission have the ability to make this go to the planning commission?
I don't believe the commission has the ability to make this go to the planning commission. The commission may have the ability to pull it up to the city commission. The reason why it's a type 2, though, I want to explain a little bit more, is based on the amount of discretion in the approval criteria. So we'll walk through some of those things, but we're looking at technical details related to the geotech, and then on the planning side, do they meet dimensional standards that are already in the code? So
Because the thing got built the first time because the planning commission said no and the city commission said yes. And that's what we got.
So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to let everyone know, because we knew this is an important site to the community. We are opening up a public comment period tomorrow, so we encourage people to participate in that land use process.
All right, let's move on.
And then potentially it would come before you for appeal. So.
All right.
But you pointed out all the reasons why we brought it to you tonight. Just letting you know that we recognize that this is kind of a high-profile location. We've done some, or the applicant's done some geotechnical review. The public hasn't, and they've been noticed on that, and then we didn't get a lot of public feedback from that. So we really just kind of wanted to bring some attention to this and give you an opportunity to think and hear about it. Also introduce you to the project team, who will introduce you after a few slides. So for those of you who don't know where we're talking about, we're at the property that's along the Newell Creek, just northwest of the intersection of Beaver Creek and 213. And today it's called Forest Edge Apartments. So there has been a lot of history of land use approval on this site. Started back in the 1990s. The site was actually developed in 1997 and named Newell Creek Overlook Apartments at the time. In 2006, that was the first time we were aware of the landslide reactivating. It was a very wet winter, and we had several low-level landslide to the degree that we were monitoring, but it wasn't until 2015 when the slide got to the point where we deemed the buildings on the lower edge of the site dangerous and evacuated, yes, several residents at the time. And that was
over 50.
Yeah.
At a week before Christmas.
Yes, I remember.
All right.
I remember distinctly as we had to work with a lot of those folks hand in hand on Christmas Eve even. So yeah, tough time. So we've received a development application. It's type 2 review process. In that is a geologic hazard overlay, which is mostly administered through the Public Works Department, natural resource overlay district, which is mostly administered through the Planning Department, and site plan and design review, which we will both we both, actually on all these, we both interface. I guess that's another point, is that the city has got, whether it goes through the planning commission or not, there's a lot of conversations and work that goes into reviewing these codes. So in that, we've spent a fair amount of time on the geologic hazard stuff, because that's been a pretty big, that's really the big issue, and how that final solution affects natural resources or the site plan kind of comes after the fact. So we've looked at the geologic hazards, but with that, we're bundling all of this land use application, and we're pursuing public comment tomorrow, right? So that period will be open again. This slide is actually a slide that the applicant has provided, and we'll probably come back to it. But really, the lower site is the area that we're talking about. So the upper site, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, is currently occupied, and the area on the lower side with all the yellow dots on it is unoccupied. And really, where the slide activity has been most impactful. The 14 dots are representative of a pump system to dewater the site, and that's really the nuance about the geologic solutions down there, which is dewatering the site, really taking the slip plane out from under a slide area and dewatering that. And we can talk, I can talk a little bit about that, but really the geotechnical engineer is here if we need to share more information with you.
So go back. Let's go to the left, and this building down here in the sort of the center that's right on the edge. When I was down there in 2015, the slide.
The other one. That building.
Oh, this building.
Yeah. The slide had gotten to the point of maybe 10 or 12 feet from the foundation. Has that changed any? Has it crept any closer?
Well, I haven't been there recently, but why don't we save that for the applicant, because they're pretty familiar with the current condition of the site. So this site just really represents, again, that lower area. So on the right-hand side of your screen is really the playground, for those of you that are familiar, or the upper, kind of the upper. So this slide is actually inverted from the last one that you looked at. So on the right-hand side of the screen is the upper part of the site, and this is the site that's been moving. And the pink clouded area is just the natural resource overlay district. And I think the intent here was just kind of show you that the civil work is going to require most of the driveways and sidewalks to be reconfigured in a configuration that's very similar to what was there originally. But as you recall, there's lots of grade changes and things that don't allow for access, easy access now, so that will be changed. And then I think the intent is to reestablish at least a service road that completes the loop. Way back in 2006, there was a loop down there, and then because of landslide activity, that changed. So this applicant's proposing to reestablish the loop as a service road, not necessarily a road that residents of the apartments would use.
And where is that?
It's the shaded area.
Shaded area, okay.
Yeah.
That's just really too small to read, even with my fabulous glasses.
Yeah, I get that. We did want to give you just a pretty high level overview. I think the other thing is just to note that we anticipate a fair amount of natural resource overlay district mitigation, and this slide shows a lot of that on the lower edge of the lower edge of the site, top of the screen.
Okay.
So again, the geotechnical engineer is here, but I wasn't sure who all would be coming. So I just took a stab at some of this. The big difference in this proposal than any proposal that prior owners offered was a dewatering system that does a much more impactful effort to de-water the slope. And in this case, water has been the problem. So they've got these 14 pumps, and that's an unusual system. We've asked a lot of questions about how, over the years to come, we would monitor that system. So there's still some answers that need to be made there, but they've committed and indicated that they are anticipating a significant O&M program and a covenant that would give the city some rights to verify that system. We, on all geologic hazards, we typically hire a third-party peer review, and that's something that we've already engaged in on this project already. And that expense that goes along with that, just for your information, is reimbursable. The applicant pays for that third-party peer review to happen, but we manage that person. It's someone who we work with regularly on all of our landslide work.
So this O&M covenant, does that attach to the deed?
We've talked about that. We haven't worked all that out, but we've talked to the applicant about the fact that this would need to be recorded because while this applicant...
I mean, this is a no-go without that attaching to the deed. And I'm not saying I'm anywhere near ready to say yes on this, but absolutely it would have to travel with the deed so that future owners, no matter who they are, would have to continue to maintain that. And that's just a base.
Right. That makes sense to staff as well, and I think the applicant as well.
Okay.
So this is a very specialized design. The geotechnical engineer that they've hired is well recognized in the industry, and so we feel good about that as well. Any approval for structural fill or retaining walls, all that would go through both a geotechnical review and building review. Definitely specialty inspections are things that we anticipate and certification during construction. And then one thing that has been raised recently that I wanted to highlight is that we would fully expect to execute an indemnity and hold harmless agreement, just like we do with all of our other geotechnical reviews and approvals. So just a reminder that that's out there as well. So lots of permits, and I guess our main message here is Laura's department, my department, will be exercising the routines that we normally have with these kind of approvals. And there's several both at the permit or planning level, the engineering level, and the building level. So we just wanted you to know that. The owner is here. Jameson Luther is the owner and applicant for this project, and he's going to lead through whatever conversation you're interested in. I know you wanted to go through this pretty quickly. We just thought it would be good for you to hear from them. They've also got their Pace engineers here, and I'm not sure who from Pace might speak up, but we'll let Jameson talk us through that. And their geotechnical engineer, and Eric is here. I'm not sure I know Jeffrey, so I don't know. No, he's not here. Okay, so Eric is here. And with that, I don't know. Jameson, you want to?
Yeah. I'm Jameson Luther.
You're going to have
To the microphone, state your name and city of residence for record, please.
Okay. Jameson Luther from RJL Holdings. We are the owners, my brother and I, Robert Luther, the two owners of this project. I reside in Tustin, California. To bring you up to, I guess we purchased the property, let's say 3 years ago, and we were very aware of the history. Not as intimately aware personally with your citizens, but we did know of the event, and we know that it was a very tough thing for the community. And I'm sure if it was in my community, I would have been there to help out. And I understand, the severity of what happened that time. With that said, there were numerous geological reports before we purchased the property over that have been done since this slide, slow-moving soils reactivated, which I think was about 2006. And all of those geotechnical reports referenced dewatering the site. What this site was missing was a responsible owner who was willing to spend anything, and I hate to say it, but this problem could have been solved with much less money and avoided a whole lot of issues if they had just addressed this back in 2006. When we purchased Riley, so we said, we can solve this. We hired a great geotechnical engineer. We came to the city in the first 6 months saying, we're the new owners. This is our intention with the property. We think we can solve this. We would like to solve this problem, make the site safe, and reopen these 42 units. The buildings themselves are structurally intact. I've been through every unit, all 42 units personally myself. This was just 2 months ago, and the units are in very good condition, surprisingly good condition. The site itself was suffering from slow-moving soils, and it comes down to this. When the wet season showed up, the soil started to move. When the dry season showed up, nothing happened. And you had a soil movement issue here since 2006. That place wasn't vacated till 2015, so 9 years later. And it was vacated because that access road had separated so much now that it disconnected the sewer and water line. And now you've got a hazard, we got to get the tenants out. It wasn't necessarily that those buildings that they were occupied in were in catastrophic danger, but it was separated, there was no services to it. And Berry Hill was involved in that as well. So rainy season shows up. What we found out through studying it over the first year of ownership, it's because the water table rises. The water table rises, the soils get heavy, it starts to move slowly, right? So our geodesign engineered a dewatering system, which I'll let him talk a little bit about so you can understand that and the effects that it's had on the site. So if I can turn it over to him for a couple minutes.
Sure, but what I'm missing is you're dewatering this section, but the slide affects, that section too. Where's the dewatering for that piece?
Sure, and I think Eric can speak to that.
Okay, all right, bring him up.
And then I'll have some closing remarks at the end.
My name is Eric Staley. I work at Geodesign. I live in Lake Oswego, and I have a cold, so you'll excuse me for my gravelly voice. Okay, well, just don't touch this mic afterward. So, the slide that we're dealing with here is everyone knows that there was an ancient landslide here, right? And actually, the gray shaded area that's labeled Berry Hill Apartments is a good proxy for where that old headscarp is located. And it involves both the upper and the lower portions of the apartments that we call the upper and lower campus, right? So the upper campus and the lower campus back in 2006 were drilled by a geotechnical engineer when this landslide at the lower campus first started. And since those inclinometers were put in the upper campus, there has been no displacement. So what we're really talking about when we're talking about the landslide is that there's this reactivation, or really the ground was predisposed to sliding, and now the lower campus was activated in a slightly smaller slide in 2006. So that's sort of the backdrop for why this failed and the nature of it right now. Because of the size of the slide, when you start to think about mitigations, you can physically stop a landslide by putting something in the way at the toe. You could regrade the slide to take weight off the top, or you could try to take care of some of the driving forces, which groundwater, we all know, has that impact. The pore water pressure creates a predisposition toward failure. Those first two things I mentioned on a slide of this size really are not practical. We'd have to down into Newell Creek and build a buttress, the likes of which I don't even want to think about, to try and physically stop it. The regrading would involve multiple property owners and also isn't practical. So really the thing that is always to multiple geotechnical professionals is to dewater the slide. And that's what Jameson was alluding to, that this was something that early on was identified as the solution for this property. And now we have implemented a dewatering system that has lowered the water levels currently during the winter time are lower than they were previously during the summertime, if that helps you understand the magnitude of the effect that we've had with our dewatering system. And we've had some pretty dry summers. The summer of 2017, when we had an active monitoring field out there to check for water levels, it was dry. And all of our water levels that we've done since the dewatering system has been activated are below those levels. So we are having a positive impact. So in addition to installing piezometers so that we know where water levels are underneath it and the system itself, we also put in an instrument called an inclinometer, which helps you understand the displacement of the ground, right? And I believe someone mentioned that there's some installed up top. There's one installed behind that building that was of concern in that upper campus right by that SCARP line. So that inclinometer has not shown displacement, but obviously it's still of concern. Our inclinometers in the lower campus, since we've activated the dewatering system, there was a slight movement, but really since January of 2019, there has been no displacement on those inclinometers. So we're pretty confident that we're having a good effect on this. In terms of why focus the dewatering on this lower campus instead of going elsewhere, the lower campus is at a lower position in this entire, now when I say complex, it basically helps to buttress the upper campus. If you stabilize the lower campus, it will help hold the upper campus in place. So speaking to this SCARP line that's behind Building 5 up in the upper campus, if you stabilize the lower campus, you're affecting the upper campus. So in terms of where do you put the greatest effect, this is the linchpin for the whole system. It's the lowest downslope, and if it's stabilized, it has a positive effect on everything above it. Conceptually, hopefully that makes sense. That's probably as far as I'll go for now.
Okay. Note the skepticism on my face.
May I ask
It's okay.
a quick question?
Go ahead.
You mentioned that it was an ancient slide. How does it go? I don't think it went away. I think it's still there. I don't think it's still there. I know it's still there. So why did you use the past tense?
I guess in terms of activity is why I would say that. So the ancient landslide is actually bigger than what is currently moving or has moved in the recent past. So the ancient landslide still does exist, but it's not active.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So as one who took a soils class as part of my civil engineering, I understand liquefaction and what happens. First slide referred to this as a deep set landslide. And your solution is going to be to take care of the water levels and use retaining walls?
No retaining
walls. Just water only.
Just
and then there's an ongoing inspection and monitoring. And then there's going to be who manages that in the long term and who manages the dewatering system long term. Where does that burden fall? You can ask when your turn.
I was going to say,
I've got 2 seats here. It's a good spot.
And the other question I'm going to ask, how are we advertising this for public comment? Because it doesn't seem to be highly visible at this point. I think we'll get a lot of comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of long-term responsibility for it, part of this site, you created the geological hazard code that we had to go through. So the geological hazard review, part of that is we need to indemnify the city. We're more than willing to do that. So in the event of what happened, unfortunately, in 2015 at Christmas, we would be responsible for those costs. Am I correct in indemnifying the city for those costs?
How do you establish that and maintain it 15 years from now or 20 years from now?
Well, okay, so that's recorded on the property, that we have this indemnification with any owner that has it. I guess it goes with the property. Also, the operating and maintenance system is something that also we're talking about just how to logistically achieve that, but the intent from John's side and my side is to make sure that that runs with the land, and that's there to provide you guys security. Our long-term vision is to keep this property. We like the area. We've done a lot of improvements to the upper campus, renovations, taking care of a lot of deferred maintenance, new roofs, protecting things. We have spent significant resources to solve this problem that you guys have had for a long time. And the data showing that it's solved is all in your guys' hands. It's in the report that we've been working on and the application and your staff reviewing and holding us accountable and asking us for more information. And all of that info that we've been creating for the last 2.5 years, it shows, not theoretically, in the ground, that it has stopped moving because of the dewatering system that we put in. It's in the ground through the inclinometers. So I just want to help you understand that point. And here's a good way to understand it. You take that whole lower campus site, it's about 3 acres. Imagine what 15 feet of water weighs over 3 acres. And let's take that weight off of it, the driving forces. I'd like to just reiterate that one point Eric made. In the dry season, this thing never moved. Our water table level is lower in the wet season than it is in the dry season. We are below where it never moved. And that's all in the report. This isn't just me saying it. The data's there in the inclinometers. In terms of us being long-term owners and holding us accountable and finding ways that I understand I can say I'm going to be here a long time, but you need ways to hold us accountable, and whoever that owner is, we're happy to, address those concerns and find a way to make that, get you guys comfortable with that.
Okay, well, this isn't a public hearing, so I think we've gotten enough information. The one thing I want to ask Mr. Weisman is, we're being told this is a type 2 application, and I don't think anybody in this commission wants this to be approved by staff without being okayed by the city commission. Is there a way we can do that?
So, thank you, Mayor. Our code, sets out certain processes for every application that comes in. That's the slot that this one fits into. There isn't a provision that specifically allows the commission to call up an application, but in the past, the city has done so under what's known as its inherent power. Ultimately, the commission is the entity that has the decision-making authority for the entire city. And there's, you've delegated it in some instances, but you also retain the inherent authority to call it up. And, certainly if somebody appeals it, it comes to this commission as well. So, I think the staff keeping you informed of when the decision is issued, and the commission could look at that point, calling it up if that's the commission's wish.
I think that we ought to proceed on the fact that the commission is going to want to weigh in on this before it's approved. Is there any objection to that?
No, just how would you recommend that we get additional questions answered?
Well, I think, let staff work through their...
do I submit those to staff?
Yeah, I think so.
Would that be your recommendation to me?
Yeah.
It would, if it appears that this is going to be called up, this is a land use decision with an open public record as the decision maker in that. I guess it depends on what type of questions you're asking, because essentially, is it better to wait until it is in front of you to ask those questions so that everyone can hear?
I would prefer that. I think let staff do their work, let them bring it to us with the understanding of the applicant that this is not a slam dunk. and there is no guarantee that this commission is going to approve this project.
Yeah, definitely. I understand your concern. I do. I know, I think I heard that some of you were on, maybe involved when it was originally, the site was originally approved and they built it.
I've lived here for 56 years. So
Yes, yeah, so I know, I can sense you're very aware, and I don't take that lightly. If there is a way for you to get comfortable, I just want to help any way we can facilitate communicating the data and the science and getting you comfortable with that.
Sure, so
However that's possible.
Work with staff. You know, John and Laura have professionals and engineers and all those sorts of people. None of us up here are, with maybe the exception of Frank, engineers. You know, I'm a 50,000 foot guy. I don't want to see this happen to another mayor 16 years down the road.
Neither do I.
So, work with staff, do all that stuff. They'll bring us the information. If we're comfortable, maybe we won't call it up, but I find it difficult to believe that we would not want to have this in a public hearing, a public setting, and be able to discuss the issues. With that, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to adjourn here. We'll be back at 10 after.